Now, as we've been discussing this morning, it is the financial provisions of this Emergencies Act that are particularly concerning to many. The federal government is saying banks have already started to freeze the accounts of people involved in the protests, and they are warning there will be dire financial consequences to come. Hilary Johnstone has been with us for that part of the story. Hilary, we were talking a little bit about this with David Common earlier, but let's explore it a little bit more because in the words of Chrystia Freeland, this will bite. What is the latest?
Yeah, that's right, Heather. That's exactly what we heard from the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister yesterday. We know that financial institutions are already moving to restrict access to both cash and cryptocurrency. That's another big thing here that we're watching as well. So the RCMP have been sharing information with these financial institutions on the protesters, their supporters, the organizers here, trying to sort of starve off or choke off access to money, which of course has now been funding this for some 3 weeks. And the government has cited terrorist fundraising laws, now directing financial institutions to target people who have perhaps donated. You were talking about that with David as well, that it's a little murky here, exactly how this is going to be applied to some people. Chrystia Freeland yesterday not saying how many accounts have been frozen, not saying whose accounts have been frozen, but certainly the threat is there looming for people who have been involved with all of this. We also know that some of these crowdfunding sites, such as GoFundMe, are going to have to register with FinTrack, which is the government's financial intelligence unit. We're going to play a little bit more now. This is what we've heard from Chrystia Freeland about these measures.
If your truck is being used in these protests, your corporate accounts will be frozen. The insurance on your vehicle will be suspended. The consequences are real, and they will bite. It is time for you to go home. And let me also be clear that we will have zero tolerance for the establishment of new blockades or occupations.
Now, Heather, there has been criticism of this because banks have essentially been directed not to have any sort of financial relationship with some of these protesters, which is going to make it very difficult for them to get access to bank accounts, to have a credit card, for example, which, of course, is pretty difficult to live this day and age without those sorts of things. So what we heard from Chrystia Freeland is that this was not something that they wanted to do or that they take any pleasure in doing, but they felt that they had to in order to restore peace and order.
Hilary, there are reports this morning we would highlight in the Toronto Star exclusively that an Ottawa judge last night in a secret hearing has frozen the bank accounts and the digital wallets of some of the convoy leaders. Now, what detail are we learning in that Star reporting?
That's right. So there was an in-camera hearing last night, which means that both the defendants in this case, so some of these organizers, didn't have much warning, and that there was no sort of public notice or public access to any of this. The result is that a Ontario Superior Court Justice, Callum MacLeod, has granted an injunction to a private citizen's effort to try and stop the flow of money. And the lawyer at the center of this, Paul Champ, he might be familiar to some of our viewers. We've been speaking about him in recent days. He's the lawyer behind that class action lawsuit that was brought by a number of downtown Ottawa residents seeking damages against some of these protesters. Also the lawyer behind that injunction that was granted to try and get the horns to stop blaring. According to the Toronto Star, some of the reporting saying that Paul Champ hired an expert who found that some of these protesters and the organizers were able to move cryptocurrency around very quickly, faster than the police could really get in to stop and intervene. So this is all about choking that off. In terms of what this means now, Heather, well, these people who have been named as defendants, they have a week to provide an affidavit showing their financial information, how it has contributed to this protest, to this convoy that we have seen over the past 3 weeks. If they refuse to do so, they could face a contempt of court charge.